Mom lied about my age to keep me out of school. Said you don't need education. I proved she'd been using my name for fraud, got her arrested, and took over her house. She's now homeless. So, let's set the stage. I'm Jake, 31 years old, average guy, Pennsylvania born and raised, just outside Pittsburgh. I've got a mom named Valerie. If you'd asked me a year ago, I would have said she was a bit eccentric, a little overprotective, but nothing out of the ordinary. Now? I'd tell you that she's the reason I'm sitting here, jobless, with no credit score, and sorting through a whole life I didn't realize wasn't even mine. Let's go back to the beginning, back when I thought things were normal, if a bit strange. Growing up, it was just Mom and me in this big, old Victorian house. I remember asking her once why we didn't live in a normal house, and she just chuckled and patted my head. It's what your grandparents left us, Jake. It's ours. We're lucky. And that was that. No matter how run down it got, no matter how many rooms we didn't use, that house was her pride and joy. But let's fast forward to a couple years back. I'm 29, working shifts at a local bowling alley, barely scraping by. I'd tried getting other jobs, but every time I mentioned it, Mom would throw a fit. You don't need to worry about that, Jake, she'd say, her voice heavy with something I couldn't quite name. Fear? Anger? You don't need to be wasting your time working under some stranger. But Mom, I'm almost 30, I'd argue, like clockwork. I need a real job, like something with benefits, a retirement plan. She'd just wave her hand and scoff. Those places chew you up and spit you out. Besides, we don't need it. Look at this house. This is our legacy, our home. You'll see, honey. It was that word, legacy, that always threw me off. I knew she was sentimental about the house, but she acted like it was some grand inheritance, when really, it was just a dusty, barely held together property on the edge of town. But I let it go. I always did. And then, one night, things took a turn. I came home late from my shift, smelling like stale beer and fried food. Mom wasn't in her usual spot in the living room. Instead, I heard her voice coming from the kitchen. She was on the phone, and her tone was low and tense. No, I told you, that's not possible. I don't care what the records say. There was a pause, then more furious whispering. I couldn't make out the words, but her voice sounded desperate. I didn't want to eavesdrop, but it's not every day you hear your mom hissing into the phone like that. Finally, she saw me standing there, and her face went pale. I'll never forget that look. Like she'd seen a ghost. She quickly hung up, forcing a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Who was that? I asked, trying to sound casual. She laughed, a short, strange sound. Oh, nobody, sweetheart. Just a little problem with the bank. They've been pestering me about some old account. It's ridiculous, really. Bank? I raised an eyebrow. We don't even have a bank account. You told me you don't believe in them.
She froze, and for a second, I thought she might actually tell me the truth.
But then, just as quickly, her face softened. She patted my cheek like I was still 5 years old. Oh, Jake, don't worry yourself about these things. It's just more of the same nonsense. I'll take care of it. That was Mom's answer for everything. I'll take care of it. But this time, something felt different. There was a tightness in her voice, a tremble in her hands. It stayed with me, that feeling, nagging at me. A week went by, and every time she got a letter in the mail, she'd shove it into her purse without opening it. I knew better than to ask, but curiosity was eating me alive. One afternoon, I noticed she'd left her purse on the kitchen counter, so I took a peek. And that's when I found it, a stack of letters, all marked final notice in big red letters, and each one with a different name. One of them was addressed to Jacob Taylor, my name, but spelled wrong. I felt a strange rush of fear and excitement. What was she hiding? I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop myself from digging deeper. And what I found made my head spin. Her desk drawer, usually locked tight, was left slightly ajar. I opened it, and inside, there was a file labeled Important Documents. I remember holding my breath as I pulled it out, feeling like I was about to cross some invisible line. Inside, I found my birth certificate. I'd seen it before, of course, but this time, something caught my eye, the date. It was off. By 2 years. According to this document, I was 2 years younger than I'd always believed. I sat there, staring at the paper, trying to make sense of it. If this was true, then my whole life had been a lie. Why would she lie about my age? Why hold me back? And then, another thought hit me, had she kept me out of school on purpose? That night, I confronted her. She was in the kitchen, making tea, and I came up behind her, holding the birth certificate in my hand. Mom, I said, my voice steady but my hands shaking, why does this say I was born in 1992 instead of 1990? Her face went white as a sheet. She set down the kettle, her hands trembling. Oh, honey, You shouldn't have been snooping in my things, she said, her voice wavering. It's complicated. Complicated? Mom, you've been lying to me about my age. Why? What else have you been hiding? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I could see the wheels turning in her head, searching for an excuse, a story. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't willing to accept whatever she was about to say. Tell me the truth, I demanded, my voice louder than I intended. Why did you keep me out of school for so long? Why did you lie about my age? She took a deep breath, then finally looked me in the eye. I did it to protect you. You were born different, Jake. The doctor said you were slower than other kids. I didn't want you to be bullied, to be made fun of. I shook my head, not buying it for a second. Mom, I'm not stupid. I was never stupid. You just kept me from everything. It was for your own good, she snapped, her voice rising. You don't understand, Jake. You don't understand the world like I do. No, you just didn't want me to understand it, I shot back. You wanted to keep me here, under your control, forever. She was silent, her face flushed with anger and shame. And for the first time, I saw her as she really was, a scared, desperate woman, clinging to a life that was built on lies. I didn't say anything more that night. I just walked out of the kitchen and went to my room, feeling like my whole world had been turned upside down. But it didn't stop there. The next day, I decided to dig deeper. I went online and searched for any records I could find, using her information and mine. And that's when I discovered the truth. She'd been using my name, and others, for years, racking up debt, applying for loans, and creating fake identities. I felt sick. She'd been lying to me my whole life, using me to fund her twisted, messed up world. And I knew I had to do something about it. A few days later, I went to the police. I told them everything, showed them the papers I'd found, and they took it seriously. More seriously than I'd expected. They said they'd look into it, and a week later, they showed up at our house with a warrant. Watching them take her away was surreal. She looked at me with a mix of betrayal and fury, like I was the one who'd betrayed her. And as they led her out, she spat at me. I did everything for you, Jake. Everything. You're throwing your own mother to the wolves. I just stood there, feeling numb. No, Mom. You did it for yourself. And now it's time to face the consequences. After she was arrested, I learned even more. Turns out, she'd been living this lie for years, using fake identities, taking out loans in other people's names, even mine. All those times she'd told me I didn't need school, didn't need a job, it was all just a way to keep me under her control, so she could use me. She's still in jail now, and I'm still dealing with the fallout. The house is mine, but it feels like a tomb. A reminder of everything she did, everything she hid from me. I'm trying to rebuild, to learn how to live on my own terms, but it's hard. Sometimes I visit her, trying to get answers, to understand why she did it. But she just stares at me with that same look of anger and betrayal, like I'm the one who ruined her life. And maybe I did. But she ruined mine first. Days turned into weeks, and then months. Mom was still in county lockup, and I was trying to piece my life together from the shambles she'd left behind. I'd sit in the empty house some nights, staring up at the cracked plaster ceilings, wondering how much of the life I'd known was real. Every creak in the floor, every gust of wind rattling a loose window, felt like a reminder of the ghost Mom had been hiding behind. And it was all still here, left to haunt me. Dealing with the legal mess she'd created was a full-time job. I'd go into court appointments, meetings with lawyers, and consultations with banks, and each time, I'd learn something new about the mess she'd left behind. She'd taken out loans under my name, applied for credit cards, and even opened accounts in the names of random family friends. The debts were staggering, the years of deceit dizzying. But as much as I wanted to feel something, anger, relief, sadness, I felt numb. Then, about 6 months in, I got a call from her lawyer. He said she'd put in a request to see me. She wasn't allowed visitors before now because she'd been in isolation, something to do with her being mentally unfit for general population. I didn't want to go, but I also knew I had to. Maybe I wanted an apology, or maybe I just wanted closure. Either way, I couldn't let her have the last word. Not after everything. So, I went. The facility was a 2-hour drive from Pittsburgh. As I sat in the waiting room, surrounded by the hum of fluorescent lights and the cold steel chairs, I felt an eerie calm settle over me. It was the calm of a man who had lost everything and found that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have much left to lose. After what felt like an eternity, they led me to a small, bleak room, a table between me and the door. I sat down, my hands in my lap, eyes on the door. And then she walked in. Mom didn't look like herself. She'd lost weight, her hair was streaked with gray, and her eyes, those eyes that had once controlled my entire world, looked hollow, lifeless. She shuffled over to the chair across from me and sat down, her gaze on the table, not on me. "Jake," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. "Thank you for coming." I didn't respond, just waited. She seemed to sense that the small talk wasn't going to fly, so she took a deep breath and looked at me, really looked at me for the first time since the day they took her away. "They told me I'd be here for a long time," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "That I might never get out." I didn't flinch. Part of me had expected her to blame me, to accuse me of betraying her, but she didn't. She just sat there, her hands shaking slightly. "Jake, you don't understand. I did what I thought was right. Everything I did, it was to protect you." "Protect me?" I asked, my voice cold. "From what, Mom? From myself? From a future?" She closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her cheek. You were all I had. When your father left, I had nothing. No family, no support. Just you in this house. And I was scared, Jake. I was so scared that you'd leave, too, that you'd grow up and realize how empty everything really was. I kept you close because I couldn't lose you. I wanted to feel sympathy. I wanted to find a shred of empathy for her fear, her loneliness. But all I felt was a hollow ache where my trust used to be. You took my life, Mom. You took my chance to be me, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. You kept me in that house like a prisoner. Lied to me about who I was, what I was worth. And for what? So you wouldn't have to be alone? Her face twisted with pain, and for a moment, I thought she might scream, might yell at me like she always had when I questioned her. But she just nodded, defeated. "I know," she whispered. "And I'm sorry, Jake. I really am. I thought if I could control everything, if I kept you safe from the world, that maybe I could keep you safe from me." She let out a shaky breath, and I could see the guilt, the regret etched into her face. But it was too little, too late. I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of her words settle over me. I'd spent my entire life believing I was flawed, that I was somehow too weak, too naive for the world outside. And all along, it had been her fear, her insecurity, that had kept me bound to her. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. She shook her head. "I don't know, Jake. They're keeping me here. And you can finally live. I know it doesn't fix what I did. I can't make up for all those years." "No, you can't," I said, my voice firmer. "But I can. I can make up for what I lost. I can learn how to live, how to be free." She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something resembling pride in her eyes. "You always were stronger than I was," she said, a sad smile crossing her lips. I wish I'd let you be. Maybe then we'd both be free." I stood up, feeling the weight of years of manipulation and guilt lift off my shoulders. I looked down at her, feeling a strange mixture of pity and relief. I couldn't forgive her, not yet, maybe not ever. But I could walk away, leave the past behind, and start fresh. "Goodbye, Mom," I said, my voice steady. "Goodbye, Jake," she replied, her voice breaking. As I walked out of that room, I felt the weight of her gaze on my back, like she was holding on to me with whatever scraps of power she had left. But this time, it didn't affect me. I was free. Truly free. Over the next few months, I sold the house. It felt strange, letting go of the place that had held me captive for so long, but it was necessary. I took the money, moved into a small apartment in the city, and started looking for work. Real work. For the first time in my life, I was calling the shots, making my own choices. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and freeing all at once. The months turned into a year, and little by little, I rebuilt. I found a job at a local hardware store, started taking night classes, and even made a few friends. I was learning how to be myself, how to live without the shadow of my mother's control over me. And every once in a while, I'd think about her, sitting alone in that prison cell, wondering if she ever really understood what she'd done to me, to us. I'd wonder if she ever felt regret, or if she'd let the lies she'd told herself take root again. But I didn't let those thoughts consume me. She was a part of my past, a part I could never change, never forget. But she didn't define me anymore. I was my own person, free to live, to love, to make mistakes and learn from them. And that was enough. So, here I am, writing this story, not because I need sympathy or forgiveness, but because I want others to know that it's never too late to take back your life. To break free from the people who hold you back, even if they're family. Especially if they're family. In the end, I found something she could never take from me: hope.